to unlock so much more of what we've just thought through with this series. I think there were so many reveals, there's so many aspects that are left unrevealed, and perhaps that's all right. Perhaps there is something of a mystery. I liked your point about Celebrim Banner. Maybe we'll see that in the next season. Maybe Adar's identity will be revealed. Maybe the Dark Wizard will eventually be revealed not to be Saruman. There was so much blue casting around that character, and now that we have Gandalf, I think there's a lot more that we can sort of pull apart, especially as the Harfoots and the Stores are going off in their own direction. I'll be curious where they end up in future seasons. And then, rightly so, with the dwarves and men, we have so many more realms to see. We need the seven rings to be given out. We need the nine to be given out. We need the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, to eventually make their appearances. And I'll be very curious to see what are these nine realms of men? Where are we going to see that downfall? Is Theo going to become, the king under the mountain who refuses his oath to Isildur, to sort of come to the aid of men? I think they're setting us up in some really clever ways, and so I'm willing to allow some of my own personal disappointments to go for a moment because I don't yet have the 5 season arc in hand. But I think there is always that possibility for disappointment, as we need to trust the showrunners. There is a side of me that feels like we have these two male showrunners, but the show is doing a great job reminding us how many women are involved. There was a great ad campaign about how many women are involved on every level, and yet there's still so many elements of the show that feel very broy, bro-ish, and I'm wanting more of the kind of feminist, queer elements to shine through. So it's not a critique; it's more this is a show that's kind of flexing and coming of age, if you will. So where do we go? Where do we sort of feel and go forward?
No, I absolutely, I agree with you about a lot of that. I think one of the strongest points about Tolkien is his approach to masculinity and his positive approach towards masculinity. This is a thing that's been talked about on the internet here and there, more, you know, more of a contemporary idea in that he doesn't adhere to the traditional ideas of what masculinity is, being tough, being cruel, sacrificing other people in order to get what you want. It's more about being a true friend, loving your friends, loving one another as you would love yourself, and reaching after for those people that are poor, people that are in piteous states. Again, pity is one of the main themes. And, one of the best lines of it was that, what was it? Celebrimbor says something along the lines of, oh, no, it was the Dark Wizard. The Dark Wizard said, um, you pity the one whose blade it's such a hard word to say. Such a weird way of saying it. But you pity the person whose blade was on your neck. And Nori goes, absolutely. And that is such a thing that there's a lineage there from Tolkien's work within Faramir and within Sam as well, who feel pity for the Easterlings, that, they were sent off to war as well under lords that were convincing them and made them go, and this whole kind of idea. There's this idea now, I think, creeping up more and more as we have people like as we have Jordan Peterson and, the ilk of those grifters, right-wing grifters, that really want to focus in on this idea of masculinity, toxic masculinity, as a positive thing, when it isn't. It's not about treating each other as humans or treating each other as human spirits or souls. It's focusing on what I want rather than what I can do for others around me. And that is so anti what Tolkien was writing about. That's not what he learned from those aren't the lessons that he learned from the First World War. And, with this show, I think it's interesting that you're saying that, where kind of some elements are leaning into that kind of theme, because that, I guess, that group of people were the people that were the loudest critics, when it comes to the first season. So it feels like, in a way, that they want to, and again, it's them, putting too much butter over bread, right? And
Not
that they
enough
want to,
butter over too much bread.
thank you. I never get that quote
It's
right.
a complicated phrase. Yeah,
Never
it
get that
is.
quote right. So anyway, it feels as if they want to appeal to that group. They want to appeal to people like us that love the lore and know it. They want to appeal to people that love, ideas of, Celebrimbor. So many people going into the first season were like, oh, Celebrimbor, why is he older? Why is he, kind? Why is he looking out for, all that kind of situation? You know, and that's only because they're focusing on Shadow of War and other things that aren't really Tolkienian, but are associated with that because they were able to use the rights. There's a difference between people that utilize the rights in order to push, or in order to not push, to communicate what they want to use with this world, versus the people that respect and love and understand the lore and want to put that across to the audience. um, because there are a lot of things right now that are using Tolkien and using his works in vain in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that so much with the criticism of the season for casting a diverse range of actors and actresses to play the different characters and the races in Middle Earth, and it's really unfortunate often though when you see a great fandom like Tolkien have such infighting just over representation and visibility. I mean, I think one of the most beautiful elements in Tolkien is that he reminds us of these struggles within races and ways of sort of addressing the shared humanity, and in this case, because the different races, our shared place on this Middle Earth that we all have a responsibility to protect and preserve, right?
And the shared struggle that we all have against the evil of our world, the
Exactly.
machine of our world, the things that are and the things and the people that are constantly pushing negative ideas at us constantly, that so many people decide, oh wait, okay, maybe this is a positive. It's
Right.
this idea of, Anatar in this situation. He's telling everybody, this is what we talk about with why we have an issue with the creation of the rings in the way that they decided to create it. In the way that they decided to create it, they're focused in on, what's the most, the ring verse, B, the corruptibility levels as we go
Mm.
down, right? So instead of that, the reversed way is Anatar approaches the elves because the elves want to keep their place within Middle Earth as the highest beings without wanting to control everybody else. They want to embalm. This is from, I'm literally saying, paraphrasing from Tolkien's letter 131, where he talks about the sketch of, the three ages of Middle Earth as he sees it in his head prior to the publishing of The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, any of that kind of thing. He talks about the machine. He talks about how he uses their desires in order to get what he wants, and that's domination, because he has that lust over domination. But at the same time, he says, oh, I want to rehab and I want to create our own Valinor on Middle Earth. So he uses the things, the desires, like much like a lot of the people that are, running a lot of, our country and other places. They want to use these things that we supposedly desire. They grab onto those desires and say, let me twist it so I can get what I want out of what you want. And that's the brilliance of the creation of the three, because the three are created again in secret with no connection to Sauron. Yes, he taught them the lore how to make these magic rings, but that's innate within their craft, or sorry, within their, I guess, souls, in a way that they want to preserve these places and preserve truth and beauty and justice in so many ways against and light, the thing that is talking about, fighting against that darkness with light, because darkness can never win within that visual of light, or not visual, but within the power that light has, the net positive power that light has. So I think it's interesting, how they're kind of reversing these things, and in the correlation of Amazon being Amazon, how those kind of things can be, again, twisted for someone to get a point across that they want to get across, although it might not be the reflection of the truth.
Yeah, no, I mean, really, I mean, brilliantly said on all points. I mean, something that I was reflecting upon as you're mentioning that and thinking back to an earlier point you made about masculinity and its relationship to the series. I think something we talked about in the first season is there were so many tender and touching moments that really felt quite Tolkienian in the relationship between Elrond and Durin. And I'm glad that we saw again that kind of wonderful friendship in this season and the kind of trials in the friendship in both seasons. Whether it's Elrond's failure as a friend to connect back to Durin, recognizing their different longevity or not on this planet, their mortality and immortality or longer life phase. I think there were moments with Nori and Poppy that I felt were really beautiful as a same gender friendship in the first season. And then with the second season, there was this insistence in the storyline of Poppy and Nori that Poppy would fall in love with one of the stores. And I appreciated that from a different perspective of kind of interracial connecting. But I also felt like, wow, we lost a kind of really beautiful same gender bond between Poppy and Nori, which is still there, of course, but there were these moments where I thought we have such beauty, and it was a kind of beauty that I reminded of in the Peter Jackson films, where Ian McKellen, lovely Gandalf, reminds us that we need the moment of Gandalf putting his hand on the face of Pippin with a palantir because it's in Tolkien. We need that relationship between Sam and Frodo to feel incredibly intimate and connected, not in a sexual way, but in this
Yes.
incredibly deep and emotional way of people who are in the trenches together, who are struggling and who are both working to actively overcome the power of darkness, the power of the ring, the temptation, the corruption, all of this. Those are the moments that feel most wonderful. And so, again, even with Isildur and Theo, a character that I didn't have much love for in season one because he felt like the whiny kid, which I understand you need to see this kind of aging up and a sort of coming of age story, which was fine and in his own way touching the darkness. But in this season, I thought there was such lovely mentorship and kind of connection and brotherhood, perhaps older brother, younger brother, that Isildur is now playing the role of an Arion in some ways for Theo. So those, I think, those are really beautiful humanizing elements in the story. I think moving forward, it is that sort of expanding and contracting of the world that I'm going to want to see more of, especially as new characters are introduced. We saw Círdan for just a heartbeat and then he's off in the Grey Havens. I do hope we have more of his story because his storyline is also so beautiful moving forward.
The and, you know, the thing that I'm just even noticing, like, it's back here. I think one of the best things about this relationship with Annatar and Celebrimbor is that
Hmm.
they show their love and admiration for each other.
Exactly.
Yes, this is a relationship, you know, that is built on this, you know, especially during, you know, from, I mean, my experiences going from a kid at 8 years old, you know, hearing about this relationship, and as things have developed further and further, you know, you see people online talking about Annatar and Celebrimbor. You see this whole kind of thing, and how there is this buildup, but you never think about the, I guess I don't want to say intimacy, but I mean in so many ways,
Hmm.
and how you learn from so many different things. Like, that's what I was kind of disappointed is that there wasn't this focus. Yes, they say that he's, you know, an emissary of the Valar, things like that. But I think with that, they had mutual respect for each other. And you know, I know that this tier here was apparently within the scene. It was not in the script. It was Charlie Vickers reacting to, again, like what you said, this like older brother or old, maybe elder statesman in a way, respecting the craft that he's learning from an elder statesman or someone that is this kind of, you know, admired figure in a way in British acting, like Charles Edwards is, to see, and then Shakespearean acting. You know, he probably got the role from being Richard II and things like that. To see that and to learn from that every single day, to see the beauty of the craft, to see the glimmers and the refractions and the little like glances, the little, you know, the cheek thing that he does, you know, that people were freaking out over and stuff like that. You know, to have constant one-on-one relationship with another actor or with somebody in another space, someone you learn from, it is so it is so well put across in their performances, and it shows that really deep friendship and respect for each other that can be put across in the real world and should be. You know, so many
Yeah.
people and so many men are afraid of showing that kind of affection or emotion or anything like that. But when you have perfect examples, even again, even with the villains, to have this positive reaction and this positive representation of showing how friendship truly can be, that is what's important about these stories, and that's why Tolkien wanted to get these points across to the world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it is that moment of recognizing that there is something so beautiful about their relationship, their connection, their bond, their mutual respect and admiration. I mean, it seems that Celebrimbor confessed to a certain extent to allowing the darkness in or recognizing and yet going along with it because there was this sense of true craft and true inspiration inspiring each other. And so in my mind, I also interpreted the tear as Anatar recognizing that there's no one else in Middle Earth, at least that he's aware of in this present moment, that could be comparable to the greatest of elven smiths, the line that was used about 8,500 times in this season. But it's also recognizing that even in Feanor's greatness and grandeur, his greatest craft is also what brought about the downfall of Morgoth. And with Celebrimbor's greatest craft, Celebrimbor's prediction for the future that there will be one that will bring about your downfall, the Lord of the Rings, you, the Lord of the Rings, I think there is that recognition that does he then realize that he perhaps is also going to face the same fate as Morgoth. And Celebrimbor has just spoken that reality. There's just as much in Tolkien about allowing influence over people through the eyes, through the speech, through our ears, the way we perceive and respond to others. Even so much that Anatar Sauron is able to communicate without speech in a kind of telepathic way with Galadriel towards the end of their interaction together, and the same kind of far-seeing, far connection that we have in later films and, of course, in the later stories of Tolkien. So there are those wonderful moments that we see in opening up of the world, and that's what I'm most excited about. I wonder if we sit with maybe the place of Rune for a moment. That was another place where I felt like we needed more time to breathe. It was a story that we had our moment, but the Dark Wizard just really sat on a throne and then used his wand to create a fall of rocks. And I really felt like, was that something that came about through hasty writing? Did it come about because we wanted to introduce a great actor to get increased buy-in for this season, which I suspect it's a combination of those things? But also, how do you expand a world for which you don't have all the rights, but you can hint in other very beautiful ways and subtle ways? I think that's what I would argue is I would love to see more of the subtlety. The subtlety is there for those of us that know it. If the intertwining serpents on Sauron Anatar's armor are related to Finrod and the Ring of Barahir, I love it. If not, great, but don't tell us. There's enough about showing and not telling that I love. Those subtle hints, that's all we need. We don't need over explication.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's one of the worst things about the
I
show.
just love that we both get like equally excited when the other is speaking. Sorry, I just
No,
love
no,
that sense of like,
no, no.
yes, we're on the same page.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't like the over explanation. I think that's one of the major things that's wrong about modern media is that we love to over explain everything. Which is why I kind of like the whole Adar not being named in a lot of ways. I know we kind of like are like, at loggerheads with that one, but I think
No,
the
it's great. I mean,
thing that
because he could be anyone. I love the possibility
exactly,
that there's so, and it doesn't need the explanation, even though
exactly.
it felt like, did you write yourself into a corner and you couldn't get out? Which is fine too. I
I
mean,
feel
I
like
think,
that
yeah,
we're
but
kind of we're on board with both of those things, and it's this is the beauty of fandom, or I hate that word.
no, I know
This is the
exactly. Yeah.
beauty of people that appreciate this kind of art, is that you're able to agree and disagree at the same time and still be friends. But no, this is the thing, is that what I was trying to catch on to was, what was it? Oh my God. It's this idea of, you know having these lines and these subtleties here. I think the one subtlety that I'm kind of thinking about now is that one Easterling character that passed away. We were once kings. I think that's gonna be one of the major driving points for Sauron to give someone in Hrun a ring.
Mhm.
I think that's a really cool point, and that's something that we both wanted to see. We wanted to see what the story is with these characters. We wanted to see a more fully fleshed out Hrun. We wanted
And
to
we got
see
to mention the
something.
Kings of the Southlands in the previous season and then follow up now. So there's, yeah, they're plotting the map, right, for these other kings and kingdoms and
Absolutely. So I think we are going to get something more fleshed out. We are going to get something that is, I mean, they mentioned about something that happened to their face. They mentioned something, about there's these little, what the Prancing Pony podcast, I think they called it, was the textual ruins. And we've talked about this before, is that there's little things. And that's what Tolkien does so brilliantly. That's what he does. The difference between fandom and Tolkien's Legendarium is that Tolkien has these backstories, has these histories, but he'll only give you one line. And he'll give you that one line because he knows, I see that line. That makes me curious. I want to grab onto that line. What is it about?
Mhm.
So instead of giving you all the information, he'll give you a hint and you have to do the rest for yourself. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about that, is that that's because that's what history and mythology and legends are. Things that constantly change over time because people adapt them to our own world. Yes, Tolkien, in his word choice, is archaic, but that does not mean that it will never not be applicable. It
Well, and
is
it's an
just
archaism that feels so relevant too. I mean, I think with Tolkien, like Shakespeare, you just have to be immersed in it and go with it. And then the understanding comes because the world is coming to life in this way. I mean, I think that's something that the Jackson films and Philip with Peter, they did work really well together in crafting a language that felt consistent with Tolkien. They had a lot of access, of course, to Tolkien's own words, but it's any time that there's an attempt too hard to emulate without really understanding, I think, the nuance. And there are these like clunky phrases over the two seasons so far about, we hammer out the business of the day, that Miriel says, or, this is some, thick gravy that Disa says. I mean, there are all these lines that just feel, oh, that didn't work. And it wasn't the actors or the actress's delivery. It was just a line that doesn't feel right for the moment. Um, and that's, I think, again, it's an exciting thing to be able to bring this world to life. It's
yes.
an impossible task in some ways to be able to work within the appendices to try to create a world in the same way that if you just took the Lord of the Rings story out of the Silmarillion and tried to turn it into the Fellowship, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King, it's an impossible task. So I think that there's so much hope. That's where I want to always live in that space, but
Yes.
at the same time, the realistic critiques that, as fans, we can have this range of opinions and try to encourage those who may be listening and watching to take that extra step to allow us to breathe, to get to know these places with a little more familiarity. And then maybe I think be a little bit, as much as one can in cinema, transparent about what these decisions are. And I always love and appreciate when there is a clear explanation of this was the thought process. If a change is made, walk us through that change. We don't have to then agree, but I think understanding, okay, this is how we felt it served narrative, and this is how it goes back to lore, or this is how we felt that it helped character development. I'm always happy to sit with that. We know that the book is never like the movie and vice versa, and there are things that cinema and the page do differently, and that's awesome. That's where adaptation is so wonderful. I think it's in that space that we can exist and see we can appreciate it when we understand. And we're clever, intelligent people like the writers and showrunners, directors, and so forth. So give us some of that insight. I love the deep dive lore that the show has done this season, bringing in multiple voices, the actors, scholars, creatives, social media types. It's wonderful. Um, so there's a lot of world yet to see, is where
Yeah, the
I'm at.
thing that I'm most hopeful for is because of their adherence to theme, is the idea of them going into a stronger intellectual direction.
Agreed.
Okay. We've elevated ourselves from season one, where you still have to have the whimsy, all that kind of stuff with the hobbits, and ooh, who's this person? Who's that person? That can all be dropped now. Please. That can all be dropped now to serve the greater purpose that is Numenor, to serve the greater purpose of getting the points across. We, as the audience, are intelligent enough to have a brutal show, not immature, a mature show that should be treated just as maturely as the text is. I understand you can't, like you said, it's very hard to get things out of appendices. It's very hard. It's very hard to get things out of which I think they have some special dispensations from unfinished tales and maybe even history of Middle Earth or, nature of Middle Earth. Possibly. I don't know. I can't say. Like how they did, again, with theme, how they were able to bring Adar to as a fleshed out character, fleshed in a way,
Mm.
fleshed out character by trying to say, hey, the world is not perfectly good, perfectly evil. It is morally gray in a lot of ways. And that's because Tolkien wanted to add his own flavor of, his faith in this idea about redeemability within the orcs and how they're not perfectly evil, and Sauron's not perfectly evil, and even Morgoth is not perfectly evil. That's the
Nor
thing
the
that I
elves perfectly
nor
flawless,
the
or
yes, thank you.
exactly
Nor the
right. Yeah.
elves are perfectly good. The dwarves are perfectly good. Men are perfectly good. Absolutely. And I think that will be interesting to see now that we have more of an introduction, or at least more of a kind of subliminal, not subliminal, but, veneer of, I keep using that word for the show. I don't know why. Veneer for the Valar and who they are. They keep representing them or referencing them as gods. When are we going to get this idea of Eru, the One? That's the thing that I'm hopeful for, because in everything, Eru is the hope of all of these characters. The ending of the world in so many ways, and the unmarring of the world in so many ways is in Eru Iluvatar, the One.
Such a beautiful point to sort of end with as we think forward. We're not going to allow 2 years to go without having additional conversations. And so I'm excited that we'll be able to look into additional lore, also expand upon our interests in medieval and think about medievalisms and cinemillennial medievalisms, I want to say. So there's lots to think through. And I'm grateful that we'll be able to find ways to connect, think within the lore, pull out any teased images or plot points as we see them for season 3. There's just so much in Tolkien that brings people together, and that's what I've been grateful for. Is that we connect over the material, we connect via social media, we've connected by these stories and these themes. And thank you for always reminding us of the importance of theme, because those themes come across whether we're reading them on the page or watching them on the screen, and that's what I've so loved. So, Dave, thank you so much again. We have a lot more to consider. We have a long journey ahead, and the road goes ever on. Can I use that line? Am I okay to say it? I hope that's all right.
You are okay. Sauron, I don't know about that.
Right, exactly.
But again, Brian, thank you so much. This has been such a great journey for us. And as you said, the road goes ever on and on.
And on. Well, Dave, namarie.
Namarie.